The Pentagon confirmed that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has placed thousands of United States troops on heightened preparedness to deploy. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby told reporters during a briefing, "The Secretary did place a range of units in the United States on a heightened preparedness to deploy. I can say today that these units include elements of the 82nd Airborne Division based in Fort Bragg, which regularly, I think you all know, maintains high readiness, as well as elements of the 18th Airborne Corps, also based at Fort Bragg, and some elements at Fort Campbell, Kentucky." The move opens up new possibilities and points to greater American involvement. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why there are indications that the U.S. could put boots on the ground. Let's get started. This video is sponsored by the free-to-play military vehicle combat game War Thunder. We talk a lot about military vehicles on this channel, but what about trying them out for yourself? In War Thunder, you can choose from more than 1,200 playable vehicles from the 1930s to the 1990s and go to battle on more than 80 theaters of war. You can fly aircraft, helicopters, drive tanks, and command ships of all types and sizes, which have been carefully recreated from their real-world counterparts. It's available as a free download on PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One with cross-platform support. So grab your friends and give it a try. All viewers of Defense Updates that register using the link in the description below will also get a free premium tank, aircraft, or ship and 3 days of premium account time as a bonus. President Biden had asserted that Washington would not send American soldiers to Ukraine to counter Russia but will only provide arms. Significant U.S. weapons are being supplied to Ukraine. But the assessment from the U.S. intelligence community seems to suggest that an invasion is imminent. There is an apprehension that a scenario similar to the 2014 annexation of Crimea could be repeated. Several fallouts from Afghanistan withdrawal are apparent, and if Ukraine is left to fend for itself, the American superpower image will receive a severe beating. Rivals will be invigorated, and allies will be disillusioned. The scenario could prove difficult to manage, and a strategic shift in the global order could commence. So it seems there's some reassessment being done. Committing to troop deployment and then backing down would have been a face loss, but the other way can be justified using several arguments. Technically, nothing can be ruled out if a massive Russian incursion starts. John Kirby stated that the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell and the 4th Infantry at Fort Carson, Colorado were also among the units placed on heightened alert, adding that the Pentagon would not provide an exhaustive list of every unit that's being placed on prepare-to-deploy orders. Other units include elements from Fort Davis-Monthan, Arizona, Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Lewis-McChord, Washington, Fort Polk, Louisiana, Robbins Air Force Base, Georgia, Fort Stewart, Georgia, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, and select additional locations in the U.S. Kirby said, "These units, all told, include medical support, aviation support, logistics support, and of course combat formations. I just want to underscore one other note, and that is, as I said many times earlier this week, these forces are on heightened preparedness to deploy. They have not been activated." The Pentagon first announced that Austin had placed 8,500 U.S. troops on heightened preparedness to deploy as a Russian invasion of Ukraine appeared imminent. Kirby declined to reveal how many of the 8,500 troops were combat troops. Kirby added, "Secretary Austin has placed a range of units in the United States on a heightened preparedness to deploy, which increases our readiness to provide forces if NATO should activate the NRF, or if other situations develop. All told, the number of forces that the Secretary has placed on heightened alert comes up to about 8,500 personnel." Kirby said no decisions had been made to deploy, and that the U.S. takes its responsibilities to NATO seriously, adding that Russian President Vladimir Putin will face severe consequences if he invades Ukraine. Largely, those are economic consequences, Kirby said, later adding that officials obviously don't want to see another incursion in Ukraine. We are using lots of levers to try to communicate why that would be a bad thing for Russia to do, Kirby continued. But number two, and it's not an insignificant number two, is to make sure that NATO stays unified and that our allies are able to defend themselves. That's what this decision is all about. Biden and his national security team have been refining military plans for all scenarios, including the option of sending troops to Eastern Europe ahead of a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine, the White House indicated. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said a decision to increase U.S. troops could come ahead of Russian forces moving across the Ukrainian border, but said such a move did not amount to a shift in Biden's thinking. She said, "We have never ruled out the option of providing additional assistance in advance of an invasion. Those discussions have been ongoing. Last week, Biden said during a news conference, we're going to actually increase troop presence in Poland, in Romania, etc., if in fact he moves." But Psaki said Biden had never ruled out sending additional U.S. troops before an invasion. "That's been part of our contingency planning," she added. The presence of U.S. troops near Ukraine, like in Poland, gives the option to quickly shift them to the actual war front. It amounts to drawing up a red line. This could make the situation very dicey for Russia, since, in a bid to overtake Ukraine, it could potentially, knowingly or unknowingly, engage American troops. This will result in a major escalation, which will be detrimental to Russian interests. In case Russia invades, it will like to keep the conflict as localized as possible and have a quick campaign. So there is merit to what the American planners are contemplating. It remains to be seen how things pan out in the coming days.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting, and kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.